Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our episode in our series of Before the Patriarchs, and as we've done in the past, we're going to recap some stuff from some previous series that are pertinent to today's. I mean, some previous episodes, I should say, they're pertinent to today's episode. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the flood. We're going to start from start to finish, and some of the questions people ask about it, and provide some answers from the Word of God about it. We're going to begin our recap here in Genesis 1, verse 2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the earth, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So now the pertinent thing we talked about this here before. We talked about this before. We talked about our second episode in the series. There's a gap in your theory. How the Bible never actually says the earth was created in 6 days. It was created in 6 days. It says it was made. It's a different Hebrew word. It's the word bara, and it literally means well, it literally means to be made, not there's instead of created. It can be also be translated, repaired, or restored, depending on the context, accurately. Another thing here was that the earth, where it says was, it's hayah, the Hebrew word's hayah, and it means, and it's translated became almost everywhere else, and that's the ideal of it, to transition from one state to another. Now, without form, as we talked, without form, we talked about was chaotic, and the Hebrew word for void there literally means uninhabited, and is usually translated that without habitation, uninhabited, without inhabitant, except. So literally it says the earth became chaotic and uninhabited. And we talked about how Hashatan, Satan, Lucifer, as he was originally known, his throne was in the Garden of Eden, we're actually told. Was in Eden, as we're told originally. And how he was his throne was beneath the clouds. That means on the surface of the earth. Of course, that's where Eden is also. And how he led it, and how he got the inhabitants. And the result of that was this face of the deep, water covering everything, in darkness. Remember, there's the first thing is let there be light. There's no light. And when do things change? When the Spirit of God moves upon the face of the waters. And that's significant for today's lesson as well. So there was a flood before. There already been a flood before Adam was ever formed out of the dust. And and that flood destroyed everything. And when the Spirit of God moved on the face of the waters, things began to change. We'll see why that's significant later in today's lesson. Now next we're going to go to Genesis 2, verses 5 through 8 in our recap. In every plant of the field before it was in the earth, in every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord God had not caused the rain upon the earth, for was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. And God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed in his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living soul. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So there's several things if we need to notice. First of all, the vegetation and how it's referring to this in this garden, and how that man, we talked about this in the abundant life, and how in the abundant life, that was had in the Garden of Eden, everything was a vegetarian, and that's the first thing we need to notice. Secondly, how everything was made for the benefit of man. We talked about with the significance of man, that man, everything was made for man's benefit. The animals, the earth being reformed, restored, the stars, all of it is for man's benefit. And that's because man was in because of this breath of life that God, uh, alone man's body was formed first, and then God himself breathed into him and became a living soul. But notice this breath of nostrils and the breath of life. And the thing is, anything with that with nostrils that breathes requires life to continue, requires oxygen, air to continue to breathe. So even this would even include things like, say, seals. They spend most of the time in the water. Spend most of the time in the water, but they have to come up to breathe. But they live part of the time on land. Everything that lives partly on land, that lives on land has to breathe somehow. Now, insects have been noted. Some people have noted some insects breathe through their skin, not through their nostrils. But either way, they got to have this oxygen to live, and everything that does not live in the water has to have oxygen to live through nostrils in particular. In whales, don't they don't breathe through a nostril in those kind of things. They have a blowhole, right? Okay. Now, in Genesis in Genesis 3 verse 17 and 18, we read the following. We read the following as our previously on or our recap continues. And Adam said, because you have because you have hearkened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten the tree which I have commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed to the ground for your sake. In sorrow you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall bring to you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. Okay, now this is when we talked about this at Paradise Lost. And basically, notice the ground itself is cursed. Previously, Adam was just like tending the garden, just like keeping it looking nice, basically. But didn't have to do anything to eat, just grab and eat it, except. But now the ground's cursed, and he's got to work the ground to make it produce food. And beyond that, thorns and thistles. He didn't have to worry about weeding anything or anything before, but now he's going to have to deal with these problems because the ground itself became cursed. And we'll see again, shortly where that plays into things as we continue along. Now we're going to jump ahead to Genesis 5, verse 26 through 32, where we we kind of end it with we kind of end up the seed of woman at this part, and we're going to look at this in a moment here. And Methuselah, so let's just start reading it again. Genesis 5, verse 26 through 32. And Methuselah lived after he begat Lamech 782 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And Lamech lived 882 years and begat a son. And his name, he called his name Noah, saying, the same shall comfort us concerning our work of the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. And Lamech lived after Noah 595 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, so there's several things we need to note here. Now, remember when we talked about the seed of woman, how Eve had Cain and thought this is it, and then Cain proved to be bad, and then Cain left the presence of the Lord, and then Cain became a wanderer, and the society and his descendants kind of got the upper hand in society and influence and everything. And they basically lived wickedly, and they, just like with these descendants of Shem, Shem who came later, his line there's this lineage that begins with Enoch, which means dedicated, and ends with Lamech, which means powerful. Okay. And so they were dedicated to this system Cain had. The Cain, the system of being off the God standard. But this other line was dedicated, and became powerful. This other line was dedicated to being on the God standard, and became powerful not in material sense in the way and through society and stuff, but powerful in God, powerful in the relationship of God. And that's the line that the seed of woman came through, who was ultimately Messiah. But there's some things we need to note, some things we need to draw from our attention out of this for today's thing, and that's about this age of Lamech. Look, Lamech's 762 years. Methuselah is, I'm sorry, when Lamech's born. Okay, so Lamech's 182 years when Noah's born. So that and what this means is to track that is Methuselah lived 600 years after the birth of Noah. But Lamech only lived 195 years. So Lamech dies when Noah's 95. When he's 595. Methuselah dies when Noah's 600 years old. And we and now we're at 500 years, and Noah's begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and that's not their birth order, by the way. And we'll go into that in a future lesson in more detail about why they're in this order and how we know it's not their birth order. Because remember in Hebrew thinking, in the Bible, order, press order matters. Most time it is eldest to youngest. We're talking about sons or whatever, but it's generally most important to least. And we'll see why. Japheth, comes in last place a little later, but for today's note that Noah is 500 years. So and Methuselah, whose name means when he dies, it will come. Enoch even was prophesying by giving Methuselah this name. It would come what? That judgment Enoch had warned about, perhaps not knowing what the judgment would look like exactly, but knew judgment was coming on people. And look, they had 969 years to repent. But sadly, we're going to see they did not. In fact, they got worse. Remember, there was a revival under Seth, where people under Seth's son Enos, where they began to call upon the name of the Lord. But like revivals do, they come, then they dwindle. And this one, continue to dwindle for these, to Noah's here 500 years, which, by the way, Noah was born 1,056 years after Adam was formed out of the dust. Adam has died, and Seth had died 10 years before Noah's birth. Okay, but Noah certainly knew Enoch, from Enos all the way through Methuselah. Okay, so he's known all these. He's known all these people, and notice that Lamech again, the influence of God gives Noah a word, and notice his comfort concerning her, because the ground that God's cursed. Back to that cursed ground we just talked about a moment ago. Noah is, Lamech is saying Noah is going to bring is the solution to that curse. And remember in Hebrew it's literally Noach, and it means comfort. Now in Genesis 6, 5-7, we read the following. And God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of the thought of his hearts was only evil continually. And he repented the Lord, and he made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And he said, I will destroy man who I've created from the face of the earth, both man and the beast and beasts and the creeping things and the fowls of the earth, and repent of me that I made them. And it, now where we were last, a little bit of recap from last week, the days of Noah, and notice how things were when Noah came in and took this 500 mark. Man is totally, it's great in the earth. In all he can think about, he's not happy unless people in general are not happy unless they're doing something, unless they all they can think about something wicked to do to other people to do. And there's and notice, and they're just doing every kind of wickedness you can imagine, or they could imagine, more to the point. And God just sick of the whole thing, and he's tired of it. He's going to destroy them. He's going to destroy. He's just going to destroy them as he destroyed the world before. But the story didn't. But the story didn't end there, because not everyone's wicked. And as we see here in Genesis 6:8-13, we read this about the hero of the day story. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And the earth was also corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. All flesh had corrupt his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me. The earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So we thought, as we discussed last week, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Why? Well, his primary qualification was he was just, and he walked with God. He walked with God, so he was doing what was right in God's eyes. God didn't pick Noah out willy-nilly to say, I'm going to show grace to this guy, for no, just be, I have chosen who I've chosen, and just any kind of nonsense like that. Noah was chosen for a reason, and we've seen, as I demonstrated before, lesson a long time ago called the chosen few. Every single person God chose, he chose for a reason, and the scripture gives us that reason. And it always has to do with their character, being just, walking with God. They were chosen to do something good. They may have been chosen to do something bad, like Pharaoh. God chose him, put him, and rose him up to be head over Egypt because he had bad character. So because he would resist, and God could bring the 10 plagues upon Egypt and bring him down, so all the earth would hear about this. But everyone that God chose, good or bad, he chose them for a reason. If he chose them for, and he chose, and he showed, if it's grace, it's because of their behavior, because of what they had done. And Noah is the one good man in all the earth. And that brings us to where we end it. And it's perfect in his generations. And remember, we talked about how we'd shown how the giants came from sons of God, B'nai Elohim in Hebrew, and how that we showed from the book of Job, those were angels clearly, and how they came out, saw the prettiest of women, perhaps starting with Naamah, Tubal Cain's sister, whose name means lovely. And they were married with them and produced the giants before and after the flood. We'll talk about the other after later in their lesson, but Noah had none of that in him. That's what it means by perfect in his generations. Not everyone was infected, because those giants had kids and we showed as they went down, as they married more and more, they became less, the angel blood percentage wise, more human. They tend to get smaller. We showed that last week, but they're still, larger than average people for sure. And people were enthralled with them, and the like. But Noah had none of that in his ancestry. And we'll demonstrate that he's not the only one, but it was a qualification that he had. So God, God now is speaking to Noah and tells him what it's going to do. And there's the great qualification of the days of Noah was violence, was the earth was filled with violence, just like today. I also don't realize they think because we don't have a giant war like World War II going on, yeah, it's not so bad. But the truth is, the world is more at war than any other time it's been at, except for during World War II. It's just not one giant war. It's easy to see. It's a bunch of small fights, and a lot of it's in the form of terrorism and the like, which is which is violence, right? So it speaks of the days of Noah speak of a time when people have gotten off the God standard, don't want to be on it, and accordingly it's affected their behavior. And we showed how that describes the day, how the day fits that description of demonic times that would come in the last days. That we are indeed in the days of Noah. It'll get worse in the tribulation, but we're in the days leading up to the end, to the beginning of the end. Okay. The beginning of the end, the tribulation, is not that far off. Now that brings us to the days lesson because it ties into that as well. In the day we're about, I mean, we end up with the destruction being announced, but now we're going to look at the salvation, the solution that God has for Noah, who found grace in him because he did live godly. So we're picking up here in Genesis 6, verses 14 through 17. Make you an ark of gopher wood, and rooms you shall make in the ark, and pitch it within, without with pitch. And this is the fashion which you'll make of it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window you shall make to the ark, and a cubit you shall finish above it. In the door of the ark you shall set in the side thereof, with lower, second, third stories you shall make it. And behold, I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, whereas the breath of life under heaven, everything as in the earth shall die. Okay, notice this. Everything has that breath of life that has to breathe through nostrils. It's on the earth. In the earth is going to, is going to be destroyed by this. Well, I mean, it means fish, wooden, and wells, and those kind of things. Okay, they'd be able to survive this flood, but not everything that lives on land. Now, gopher wood, it's probably acacia wood. The thing is this wood's sort of the titanium of wood. It's lightweight and strong. And some of this word ark, the ark's Old English word means box, okay? And indeed the Hebrew word taveh also means box, okay? I mean, strictly speaking, it means a coffer, like a box with a slit on the top where you put coins in, where you keep coins in. And it's a box. So first of all, he didn't tell them to make a boat. The ark didn't look like what you probably have seen with a keel thing that runs down the center of the boat to keep it, and the boat's got and the sides are curved, and so on and so forth. And some have shown it with kind of like that, and it looks like a house built on top of it. But it literally means a box, okay? And and you may have also seen these pretty pictures of it with, pretty, like oak looking wood or something, like some sort of pleasant looking wood. But no, you don't see the wood. Pitch. This pitch is like tar, and put it on the outside and on the inside. Well, the thing about that is it makes it more waterproof, and on the inside also. So if there should be some sort of damage on the outside, you don't get a leak because you got it on the inside. Okay, keeping it from leaking in. Okay, so very sturdy design here, and very simple. Now look at these Look at these dimensions. 320 cubits is just little, a little. We know the cubit's 20 inches, 22/3 inches from the royal cubit of Egypt, which was the measurement they were using as we discussed last week. So that makes the ark almost 520 feet long, a little over 515 feet long. Now its width is just a little over 85 feet wide, and its height and its height is a little over 50 feet high, a little over smidgen over 51, okay, feet high. So these are dimensions. So this is the dimensions of the ark. Gives you an idea, and to give you an idea how large this really was. It wasn't until they started building steel ships in the late 1800s that anyone made a vessel as large as the ark. It's cubic space. It's the cubic feet in it is comparable to, say, perhaps the Mall of America, or maybe somewhere larger than that, or perhaps even a large skyscraper like the Empire State Building, perhaps, even. Perhaps not the whole Empire State Building, but let's say half of it. And just to give you an idea, this thing is just huge, okay? It's a huge box. And now we're talking about this window. Now, so if the window's not quite at the top, goes a cubit down below, all right? A cubit from the top and goes all the way around. And people say, well, why didn't the rain get in? Well, we'll discuss that in a minute. Wouldn't rain come in through that if you got this window all the way around? But it doesn't. And notice there's 3 stories, and it doesn't specify here, but it makes sense if you're knowing about loading and weight distribution. Put the heaviest things on the bottom. So it's probably they probably weren't even sized. Probably the tallest one was probably on the bottom. They probably weren't 10 cubits each. The tallest one was on the bottom, and maybe it was it may have been 15 cubits or whatever. Something big enough to handle giraffes and elephants, that kind of thing. And the next layer was then perhaps a smaller one on the top to put small animals in. Okay, in these three layers. So the ark is now you got a kind of a pretty good idea what the ark looks like. A description of it. And again, notice it's gonna, it's being made big because a lot is going to go into it. Now, this picture here I have is the closest I've found to what the description the Bible gives. Oh, there's a little indented front area there, which doesn't necessarily. That's maybe an artist's conjecture. It didn't literally say that. They have wire flowing off it, and you also notice it's at an angle. And that's the other thing about the ark is it wouldn't be at an angle. I watched the video where the Navy had a simulator where they put little scaled down models of ship designs for future ships in it, and it creates waves, can simulate waves and stuff, and see how it'll handle rough seas. They put this model of this box in there, and they turned it all the way up. The seas were just going up and down like crazy. The ark was sitting there as level and as flat as it could be. I mean, it wasn't designed. There's no keel or anything because it's not designed. It's not designed to row with the waves. It was designed to be stable. It wasn't just it didn't need a rudder. Wasn't designed to go to be steered from one place to another. Didn't need sails or something to power it. It wasn't designed to move around the earth. It was designed for one thing and one thing only: to not sink and be as stable as possible in the storm that was coming. So, they weren't being pitched around and rowed around like you may have seen in movies. the ark, the world is going crazy around them, but they are the very scene of stability. Now we're going to continue on. Now we're going to continue on in Genesis 6 verses 12 through 18 about the ark here. But with you I will establish my covenant, and you shall come in the ark, you and your sons and your son's wife, and your wife and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shall you bring in the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the fowls after their kind, of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing after its kind, 2 of every sort you shall bring into you to keep them alive. And take you all the food that is eaten, and you shall gather to you, and shall be food to you and for them. Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. Okay, well, first thing I want you to notice is the first time a covenant's mentioned. That first time we see that word covenant. And we'll look at that covenant, in probably our next lesson after the flood, if not the one after that. But it's just worth noting. And notice who goes in there. Noah, his 3 sons, who we mentioned already, and their wives. So there's 8 people altogether. But it definitely could have held more. And we'll discuss that later. Now notice that the male and female pairs again. And we kind of mentioned this we kind of mentioned Lamech, the descendant of Cain, who started polygamy. Not even the animals here at this point are polygamous. A lion, a lioness, not a pride of lionesses. There's a reason why that changed. There's a reason why that changed, and we'll definitely discuss about how the world changed when we talk about after the flood. But notice at this point, they're all matched up, one male, one female, going in as pairs. And the food, well, what are they going to eat? You have to bring a bunch of extra animals the lions can eat? No. Remember, everything is vegan at this point, or vegetarian, I should say, at this point. The birds are vegan, and everything else is vegetarian at this point, as we showed in previous lessons and alluded to earlier today. So they're gonna have to gather this food for all these animals. And I want you to notice the expression "after their kind." Well, let the word cattle throw you. It doesn't mean that only cows were saved. Often that King James word means livestock, and also just mean beast, land animals. And creeping things on the earth would include insects and whatever, and lizards and whatever. And could arguably some argue the insects weren't even necessary because a lot of insects actually breathe through their skin, not through their nose. But regardless of which way, I want you to focus on just the word kind. I mean, Bill said, well, there's, today there, there used to be the Caspian tiger, and there used to be, all these variations of tigers and variations of bears and etc. And you start getting this number. Well, but we know from DNA, like all brown bears came from a single brown bear type species, and the black bears and the related ones like that, who often also have that sort of yellow pattern, even if they're speckled bears or sun bears and the like. They all came from a single, and it's not really different than cattle. There's hundreds of breeds of cattle, but we all know we know they came from one breed originally. And man, through specialization of breeding, narrowed the genome so to the point where they, as it's called, kept the breed. And the same thing with dogs. I mean, the dogs, a teacup Chihuahua and a Great Dane, and a Saint Bernard, and so on and so forth. All these variations, they're all dogs. We don't sit there and try to think each one is a species. Matter of fact, biologists can't even agree on the definition of species exactly. But the Bible speaks of them in kind, and that's correct. So there only had to be two tigers. Didn't have to be one for every subspecies there is. Two tigers of this root species, the subspecies came out of, and two brown bears, and so on and so forth. I just thought it's worth mentioning in case, because the Bible says, "Let us be ready to give an answer to those, those who don't know." And people will try to raise up these type of objections, and try to make the number of animals necessary for the ark to hold larger than it really was. Is the point here? And also, I want to point out to you, nowhere does it say how old these animals are. Well, we'll get to that in a minute here. But it'd be wise to take small ones, young ones. They'll have a long, have all their fertility years in them. At the very least, at the beginning of sexual maturity, or perhaps a little bit before that. They'd be smaller. They would have longer to repopulate the earth. I mean, it wouldn't be very smart to take the two oldest ones you could find, or the two biggest. So, give Noah a little credit for a little wisdom there, and perhaps the Lord, as well. And you'll see why I said that, particularly the Lord as well. And we'll see why I said that in a minute. So if we continue on in Genesis 7:1-6, we see Noah's response to this in the wrapping up these instructions. And the Lord said to Noah, "Come you and all your house into the ark, for you've been righteous before me this generation. For every clean beast you shall take to you by sevens, the male and his female, and the beasts are not clean by two, the male and his female. The fowl also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep them alive upon all the face of the earth. And yet 7 days, and I'll cause the rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance I have made I will destroy off the face of the earth." And Noah did all according to the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. Okay, there's several outstanding things I want you to notice. Again, notice, been righteous before me in this generation. And I'll perhaps talk about that a little bit more detailed in a future one. But Noah was righteous he kept himself pure in an impure generation and an impure time. And in our congregations where they meet on the Sabbath or on Sunday, or perhaps some other day in some places, sometimes people have a testimony and they'll talk about their testimony, and generally they think the more wicked they were and came to salvation, the greater their testimony. But the Bible tells us the greatest testimony of this is this, that you kept yourself pure in an impure world like Noah did. And again, in the future lesson, we'll show why but that is the greatest testimony of all. So don't feel like you need to quote, as someone said, build a testimony by going out and doing wicked. If you've been restrained from wickedness, particularly when you're surrounded by wicked people trying to pull you into it, that's the greatest testimony you can possibly have. Don't mar it by giving in to sin. So, that's the first thing we need to notice here about Noah. But notice the next thing. The males by sevens. Now, some will say, well, that means they took seven of every clean beast. And notice this is the first time the clean is mentioned between clean and unclean. Notice that distinction. But the sevens, notice male and his female, as we saw earlier. So it's really 7 pairs, okay? But again, there's no polygamy here, even among animals at this point. So what? So the lion doesn't have a pride with a bunch of lionesses. Everything was made to go male and female paired up together. In the beginning, and so the Lord has done it here as well, even down to the animals, to give us an example. And the clean. So Noah understands what clean. I mean, he has to understand what clean means. And again, that goes back to Abel, who gave out of the flock a lamb. We'll look at this a little bit more in detail in our next lesson. but clean are the ones suitable for sacrifice. And no one knew which ones those were. And notice the fowls are also by sevens. Seven. So there's not two parrots taken. There's seven. There's 14. Seven males, seven females. And again, when you consider that it's we're taking the root types of each animal, we don't and the variations come afterwards. We don't have to worry. There's plenty of space. Okay, and for more people than more than the 8 who showed up. By the way, we'll cover that a little. We'll cover that a little bit more and show that this is the case later. But now 7 days have come, and people said, "Well, that's because Noah's father died, Lamech. Lamech died, and now there's mourning." Remember, Lamech died when Noah was 595 years old, and now Noah is 600 years old. But Methuselah died when he's 600 years old. His grandfather outlived his son by 5 years, and all the others who preceded in this line that Noah came from have all died off. If you've kept track, okay. Methuselah's the last one besides Noah in this line to die off. Because again, his name meant when he dies, it will come. The judgment of God. Well, now that judgment's been revealed. And 100 years have went by. I want you to notice. So, this was a long process of getting things, of building the boat, gathering all the food, and getting the animals ultimately. And again, notice the animals weren't gotten until, as we just mentioned a moment ago, until right before the flood came. So perhaps this week was spent loading. It appears it was spent loading the ark, perhaps. But it's been said that maybe it's a custom. It's a custom in a lot of places today that when someone dies, the patriarch, the family mourns for 7 days. And it's possible that 7 days were 7 days of mourning for Methuselah. But it doesn't really just flat out say that to us, okay? But we are told to gather them, to keep seed alive upon the face of the earth. So tell something else. God doesn't want any animals going extinct. And I talked in a previous lesson about his no nonsense environmental plan, how he'll destroy those that destroy the earth. So habitation, reservation, the preserved species of animals and stuff is all in line with God's word. Now we continue. We continue on looking. Look at our intrepid hero here, Noah. The flood's about to come, and the day has arrived. The day is arriving here. And what did Noah do? In Genesis 7:1-2, Noah went in, his sons and his wife and his son's wife with him into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Now the clean beasts and the beasts that were not clean, and fowls and everything that creeps upon the earth, they went into Noah in the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the earth were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day, were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Now, let's begin. There's sort of a lot here. Now, notice when God says there's 7 days, Noah and his wife go on into the ark. And they start moving, and they start bringing the animals in at that time. So after those 7 days were over, the water. I heard people say, "Well, look, it was a miracle. The ark was open for 7 days, and it was raining." And no, the ark. The rain did not start till after that 7 days is passed. And another first we have here. Again, whether or not he was mourning for Methuselah or not is speculation. But Methuselah's death certainly seems to have been the trigger point. The trigger that judgment's coming is going to be complete. The 7 days. Number 7 speaks of completion. And notice this is the first time a date's given for an event. First, we just talked about the years, the year since Adam was formed out of the dust, and then was now it's shifted to the year of Noah. Now it's shifted on years, the year of Noah's life, and this is still connected to Adam when he came out of the dust. 656 years now, and that's the second month, the 17th day of the month. Now, if you remember, there's a little bit of foreshadowing significance to this date, and I'll explain it to you. If someone was unclean on Passover, then which came in the first month, on the 14th day, starts the 14th day with the day of preparation into the 21st day. On Passover, that if they were unclean, then they were to make up Passover in the second month. They came in the 14th day to the 20th day of the second month. And so right in the middle of that, the 17th day of the month, is when Noah goes in there in this second feast of unleavened bread. Remember that, and that feast of unleavened bread, that Moedim, is a picture of sin being taken away. So in a sense here, that baptisms, baptisms sort of pictured here by being covered by water, and it's sort of a picture of sin being taken away a second time, born again, given a second chance, the human race as it was. And now the question people have had: 40 days and 40 nights, 40 being often associated with judgment. You couldn't give more than 40 stripes, 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. It's the first place 40 is mentioned too in this context, setting the pattern there for us of judgment. And this judgment's the reign of, this judgment, this reign isn't this, wow, what's that coming out of the sky? That's weird. It's the judgment of God. And people said, well, look, skeptics of this have said, look, how could all that water, where that water come from and where'd it go? Because they've rightly observed it'd have to be, if it really covers the earth, it'd have to cover all the oceans today at whatever height's necessary to cover the tallest mountain, as well as all the land. You understand? It's water. It's water. You're on a sphere. If you're one of these flat Earth people, you're on a circle. But regardless, the water has to cover not just the land, but all the water that's already on all the oceans that's already on the earth. So, well, it tells us right here the great deep broken up. Now, what does it mean? It doesn't mean it came out of the ocean. It means deeper than the ocean. That's why it's the great deep. And indeed, about a year or so ago, if you follow science journals and the like, you'll know that they found a bunch of scientists have discovered. I believe they were using, if I remember right, ground penetrating radar. A probe at the bottom of the ocean floor. They found there's an ocean under the ocean, underground, and there's actually more water underground than there is in all the oceans. And that's what broke up. Remember that sprinkler system we mentioned earlier that was coming up, the mist coming up? Well, there's water under there that it's making its way up in the form of this mist, right? Well, now it's not just coming up in a little mist, but it's coming up like kind of like an artesian well on steroids. An artesian well, what it is like the ground is broken up and the fountains is spring out of the ground. We artificially make fountains. This is a natural fountain like that. And they have been known to just burst out of the ground, sometimes quite, to someone's, perhaps someone's digging disturbs the ground, it burst out. That's happened to, modern times people have been looking for water, but it's also just happened people plowed a field or whatever, and it's weakened it somehow, or something, or maybe some sort of event like an earthquake or something, and it just burst out of the ground where there wasn't, and perhaps shoots into the air. Well, this is artesian wells. Who knows, 100 miles wide, however, or just a ton, or just a bunch of them. So there's a bunch of water flowing up from under the ground as well. And the windows of heaven were open. Remember, it had not rained. So now you got two sources of rain. One, the water's coming into the ground, shooting way up in the sky, and coming down initially, and eventually that water's going to be above this level. It's just going to be the water's going to keep rising below, and also going to keep rising from above. Remember that we talked about there wasn't really clouds. It was so we separated the waters. Well, those waters, which are vapors, right? Like the vapors that came out of the earth now are in the sky today, but back then they were on, that was kind of on the earth, the mist, and those and that water was holding them up. Quit, God changed things and quit holding them up, and the whole world changed, by the way, by this flood, when this flood occurred. And we'll talk about that in more detail in our next lesson called After the Flood. But the world, the whole world's changing here. So that's where our water came from that again previously up there, and that alone wasn't enough. But from the ocean that's under the ocean, as one. So I'm quoting one scientist to tell you worded it. Came up was now coming up on the ground, above the ground. In 40 days. Everything's gone. The rain's coming down continually, partly from these fountains to the water reaches the top of where they'll reach, and also from above, from that waters above the firmament, above the atmosphere. Now we continue in Genesis 7:13 through 18, and we read the following. In the selfsame day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah and Noah's wife, and 3 wives of his sons with them, into the ark. They and every beast after his kind, all the cattle after their kind, every creeping that creeps upon the earth after his kind, every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. And they went into Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. They went in, male and female, all flesh as God commanded, and God shut him in. And the flood was on the earth 40 days upon the earth. The waters increased and bare up the ark, and was lifted up above the waters. And the waters prevailed and increased greatly on the ark, and the ark went up into the face of the waters. So now we have a little parenthetical thing here, reminding us again that Noah, the same self day Noah went in. Well, we saw earlier he went in a week earlier. So, they apparently were going in and out. And this day they go in, it's a different day though. Remember, God gave them a week's notice, they know this is the day. And they've gathered the animals we saw previously, but perhaps until this day, they let them go out and, eat grass or whatever was available out there to conserve their food or whatever the case was. But today, they're all in the ark. So they're all in the ark on the day when the rain begins. And this is important. Again, notice male and female pairing again. No polygamy, not even among animals. And notice where there's the breath of life. And we talked about that earlier and brought the importance of that. Things that didn't need this breath of life, like whales, which were mentioned specifically as being water animals, by the way, when it talks about the animals that live in the great wells that live in the when it talks about the animals that God made in the waters and made them come abundantly. People say, well, they breathe air, but they can live in the water and manage, okay? But everything that couldn't is there in the ark. And notice that God shut the door. God shut him in. Now, when this judgment came and rain began to fall, maybe there were people who perhaps ran to the ark, who had seen Noah doing all this, hadn't believed him, thought he was out of his mind, etc. And who knows? Perhaps Noah may being human, wanted to let them in. But Noah's not the one who shut the door. The Lord was the one who shut the door. And when he shut it, it was shut. There was no going back, and there was no, Noah couldn't, there's no helping anyone. And we'll look at some more in our next lesson about Noah, and we'll look at we'll look at some of these. Well, the Bible gives us some information about the thoughts he had and the feelings he had during all this. Some of it we'll cover today, and some we'll cover another day. But Noah could do nothing about it. And notice, remember that 40 days. This is the judgment of God coming down. And notice when the judgment of God came down, the ark, the place of the righteous was lifted above the earth, was lifted off the earth. It was lifted above the judgment. When did that begin? When it began being lifted, when the judgment began. And the ark, of course, they picture. Remember, it's a safe and stable place. Now they cannot in the ark. Remember, it's got pitch black all the way in and out. There's one window, and we're going to look at. They can't even see out that window. I'll explain why in a moment. We'll see why that is in a moment. They cannot see what's going on, the judgment that's falling on the rest of the world. They are totally isolated from it. And, so this is a picture, the ark is a picture of being with God. Here's God commanded him. Here's where God's commanded him. And, the righteous being lifted up off the earth before the judgment, when the judgment of God comes down upon the earth. And this judgment's a picture of the tribulation. And that place of safety is with Messiah. We meet him in the air above the earth. So this ark being lifted, the ark, that place of safety being in the air above the earth, above the judgment that comes upon the earth, is a picture of the rapture. And I'll cover that in more detail in a future lesson. And in Genesis 7, verse 19 through 24, read the following. The waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. All the fish died that moved upon the earth, both fowl and fowl of cattle. I'm sorry, all flesh. I said all fish. All flesh died that moved upon the earth, both the fowl of cattle and of beasts, and of every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, and every man. All in whose nostrils was the breath of life, all that was in dry land died. In every living thing that was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of heaven, they were destroyed from the earth, and Noah only remained alive, and all that were with him in the ark. And the water prevailed upon the earth 150 days. Okay, so 150 days. 150 days. It rained 40 days. Now 150 days go by. Okay, and when it rained those 40 days, how high did it go? 15 cubits. 15 cubits upward. That's a little bit over 25 feet above the water, above the mountains, above all the high hills, above the highest mountain. Today, that's Everest, which may or may not have been the highest mountain at that time. We'll explain that in a future lesson. But what is worth noting about Everest is they have climbed Mount Everest, have documented and shown on Mount Everest near the top are lava plumes. Now, if you don't know what a lava plume is, that's what happens when underwater volcano erupts, spits lava, and it hardens quickly from being underwater. Now, if Everest was the tallest mountain back then, was the tallest, and it was underwater, it means every other mountain on every other piece of land on Earth also had to be underwater. It's the highest place the highest mountain in the world, the highest above. And notice 25 feet above the water, a little over 25 feet. So, not even an elephant a tall elephant if it could manage to somehow not starve in all this time, could hold its trunk up and breathe through that. Everything that relies on breathing through its nostrils is going to die. Okay. Every living thing that's on the face of that lives on the ground died. Now these, don't know the reason why God again preserved the animals is because remember they were made for man's benefit. Animals were made for man, not man for animals. So God preserved a seed. They couldn't, Noah could have built a boat being able to carry every animal on earth, but animals weren't people. It's man, that's significant, not animals again. So now, so after the water stopped, 120, 150 days have gone by. Okay, the rain has stopped, but they're just sitting out there. Now we're going to continue in Genesis 8, verse 1 through 7, and see what happens after 150 days, and we'll see why. And there's a little bit of a recap here, a little bit of a reversal here, as it were. Okay. 150 days, they're just sitting out there in this. They're sitting out there alive in the ark. It's floating on water. No storm, no rain, nothing. Just floating. But now it's about to change, as we see in Genesis 8, 1 through 7, verses 1 through 7. And God remembered Noah and every living thing, and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged, began to go down. The fountains were also of the deep, and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain in the heaven was restrained. And the waters returned from off the earth continually. After 150 days, the waters were abated. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 7th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased continually into the 10th month. In the 10th month, the 1st day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. He sent forth a raven that went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from off the earth. Okay, so there's some things we're going to notice here. Okay, first of all, remember the Spirit of God moved across the deep, and that's when the world began to be restored. Well, now the restoration begins with this wind. They picture the Holy Spirit passing over the earth, over the face of the deep that's covered the earth again, in a similar manner as what we saw from previously. And the fountains from underground have stopped doing this. And now, where's this water going back to where it came from? It's not going to go back up to the canopy. We have the skies, but it's going back to these underground fountains. Okay, and we'll show that with some more evidence that in a minute. And it's a slow process. And notice 150 days. Now, the 150 days is inclusive of the 40 days of rain. And I'll show you how we know that, because right here, the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, we went from the 6th day to the 17th day to the 7th month. 7 minus 2 is 5. And this is also this would be during the time of the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. Sukkot begins on the 15th day of the month, ends on the 22nd day of the month, of the 7th month. So, you're into the 3rd day of Sukkot here. So the ark here is a sort of a Sukkot that Noah and his family is living in, a temporary dwelling. They're not going to live in this thing the rest of their life. Okay. And and notice how they're continuing to decrease. they're continuing. It has decreased enough that Noah's boat comes in this mountains of Ararat, and today Ararat's the highest mountain. And there's, a guy in 1914, way before we could Photoshop anything or whatever, took a picture of the ark from a biplane. The plane hadn't been around that long. You know, Josephus told Vespasian, who he would take him to the ark if he didn't believe him, he would show it to him. And then Vespasian had went there. If Vespasian had taken him up on it and went there, and it wasn't there. He basically made a fool of Vespasian. Vespasian would have had him crucified or something like that. Josephus would have died some sort of brutal, horrible death, because you don't, at the time as general, but later became emperor. You don't, mock the emperor. Okay. So, he had obviously a high level of confidence. It was there. Josephus said, and even in modern times, there's people who live in that area said, "Oh yeah, we'll show you," until the Turkish government blocked it off as a military zone. They don't have anything of military value on there. Now their claim is it's the high ground. They don't want Russia taking it, and and indeed you can see across into Ukraine and whatever from it. This was back when I guess they did this back in the Cold War, but even the day, there's elder people who remember who said that, and people who snuck into this because they don't really, I don't know. I guess they may have one guy who walks the perimeter or something. Who knows how they do it, but people said they have snuck into it at least, and so there's really any reason to doubt the ark existed. Okay, and it went in this area of the mountains of Arafat. Again, Arafat today being the tallest one of those. But now, and if it is Arafat, it's way taller than the mountains around it. So it took a while to get where the tops of the other mountains could be seen. As we see here, as we see here, about 44 days. And the reason I want to bring this up to you, remember we said the 150 days. It's been 5 months exactly. Well, in modern biblical calendar, as I talked about the biblical calendar. First of all, remember the word month can mean a set unit of time, 30 days, or it can refer to a calendar month. And if a calendar month is less than 30 days, it's actually called a deficient month because it's 29 days. But this tells us something before the flood. At this time, there's 5 months exactly, 150 days exactly. Bring us to 130, bring us months are 30 days long. And we'll talk about this some more in our next lesson after the flood, but it's more evidence the whole world changed. Even the moon used to be a lot more predictable cycle. And, we'll talk about why that would be again next lesson. But just note that. So now, notice 40 days after the 10th month. Okay, the first day of the 10th month. So now we're into the 11th day, of the 12th month, and Noah is opening up this window, and he's sending a raven. And the raven just flies around, but doesn't come back to Noah. It just keeps flying around till the water's dried up off the earth. Perhaps it lands in the ark, or who knows, wherever else. When it gets tired of flying, and then it comes back. And a raven, remember there's no distinction between clean and unclean. So there's 14 of these ravens. Well, one of these is just floating, and just flying around, but he doesn't ever return to Noah. And ravens, there's some things worth noting here. A raven is an unclean bird. A raven is black. And remember that pattern we talked about, darkness and light, like day starts at sunset and it follows by, so sunset, evening followed by morning. So first of all, a disappointment, a week of, a time of disappointment here for this raven, because the raven just is not doing what Noah wanted at all. He's not returning to what he was sent out forth to do. So we continue on here in Genesis 8, verses 18 through 13. We read the following about the next plans. And also he sent forth a dove from him to see the waters were bait, to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. And the dove found no rest for the sole of her feet. She returned to him in the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. And he put forth her and took her and pulled her unto him into the ark. And he stayed yet 7 other days, and again sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came to him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew the waters were abated from off the earth. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and sent forth the dove, which returned not again unto him any more. And it came to pass in the 600 and first in the first year, in the first month of the first day of the month, the waters were dried off from the earth, off there. And Noah removed the cover of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the water of the ground was dry. Notice here earlier, Noah opened the window. So these windows had shutters or something of the sort. But notice here that they also have a covering. There's a covering of the ark, So, and perhaps it covered the whole ark. But definitely covered this area with the windows. So that kept, if you're the shutters, they didn't have glass panes. There's still been the opportunity for rain to come in through there. So there's a big covering that covers these windows as well. Okay. And perhaps the covering goes down so far, and maybe perhaps goes out, and so air can come up, but water is not going to travel upward, right? It's traveling downward. And it's high enough up off the ground, 50 around 50 feet, that it's not going to splash up, going to be splash coming in. So there, another feature that's not mentioned, but is very possible and likely, is like on the Mayflower in boats and wooden ships like that. They put a big hole in the middle of the ship, and you may think, well, wood wire just come in and sink. No, the air inside the ship would keep that from happening. And so when there's a storm or whatever, they could, instead of throwing their waste products over the side of the ship, they threw them in this hole. And so the bottom of the ark could have definitely had a hole like that as well, by the way. And the air pressure in the ark would have kept the thing afloat and kept water from leaking in. So all these questions and objections people have to the possibility of the ark are just foundless, we find. But back to the dove. So now remember, darkness followed by light, evening followed by morning, wickedness followed by righteousness. This pattern that continues with this dove. The doves are generally white. Yeah, there's some varieties that aren't like mourning doves, I understand, except, but the doves, particularly in the biblical world, in that zone, were generally white. So, the raven was black, this one's white. And not a picture of skin color. The fact is, we're all some shade of brown. Toilet paper's white, people aren't, okay? It has nothing to do with any of that kind of racist nonsense you may have heard. But notice that the dove is faithful and comes back to him. And now the dove returns to him, and he knows, okay, it couldn't find, the dove's not like the raven. The raven will just sit on an empty hill or top of a mountain, an exposed mountain or something. The raven is looking, the dove wants a branch to put its legs on. It's looking for vegetation. So after 7 days, now we're at somewhere around 12th month, 18th day. Okay. Somewhere in that era, perhaps a little longer. We don't know how, well, we can figure it out in a minute here. We can go backwards and figure it out. But he sends this dove out again. And this time the dove comes back with an olive leaf. So he knows everything. So he knows the waters are off the face of the earth, but not too well. Maybe just the top, just below the tops of the trees, or perhaps something like that, because the dove did return, but brought some evidence. So he waits 7 more days. Now we're about the 25th day of the 12th month, and and the dove doesn't return. So he knows that the ground is dried up, and it's possible. It's possible perhaps that this was actually the 24th day when he sent it out the second time, the 17th day of the first month of the 12th month the second time, and there was a gap there between the raven and the dove of a few days. We could see that. That could be understood that way as well. But regardless, the timeline matches up. Whichever way you want to look at it. So now, why the first day of the first month? There's significance to that as well. That is the biblical New Year. Okay, that's Aviv. In this month will be the head of your months. And notice, God's care here. He has them land the ground's dried off the face of the earth right at the beginning of spring when vegetation is going to spring up. Because Noah, brought food, but they only had, he's got to be running out of food at this point. As big as the ark was, he can only carry so much food, etc. And they're probably getting low on this. Well, and in disasters, they were getting low in this, and they showed up at the beginning of winter. But they began at the time when everything starts springing up, and vegetation. Remember, everything eats vegetable is a vegetarian at this point. And we finish our examination of the text about Noah and the flood here in Genesis 8, verse 14 through 19. In the second month, in the 7th to 27th day of the month, was the earth dried. And Noah spake, and the God spoke unto Noah, saying, Go forth the ark, you and your wife and your son and your wife's sons with you. Bring forth with you, and every living thing is with you, of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. They may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful, multiply upon the earth. And Noah went forth, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, every fowl, and whatsoever creeps upon the earth after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. Okay, so now, first of all, the second month, the 7th and 20th day, which I'm sure there's a reason we're being told this, but it's not related to any of these biblical feasts that I've mentioned before. However, it does tell us some information about this, that it took 55 more days for the mud to dry up. That's what it means by the earth dried up. Not talking about the planet, it's talking about the ground. Okay. So and remember that. So that water that's in that ground's either got to is evaporating during that time, or probably all the water it's going to go back underground's went, but now it's going to evaporate up. And we're going to see that. We're going to see when we look next week, the whole world has changed. When we look at after the flood, when we look at after the flood, we'll see the whole world's changed. But notice now, this is the first time. And I want to notice this is the first time it mentions God speaking to Noah, since he sent him in the ark. So for a little over a year, almost, I mean, a little over a year and 10 days, we have no record of God speaking to Noah. All that time, Noah's in the ark. Noah's in that place of safety, that place of stability. When the world's under judgment and going, in chaos, Noah and his family cannot see any of it. They had that covering we just talked about taken off. They couldn't see it. They perhaps couldn't hear, except maybe the pounding of people let us in. They couldn't see where they were going. They couldn't until it landed. Noah came out, land on Arafat, and it was probably, obvious when they weren't, moving around at all in the water. And Noah came out to take a look. They could, they were in darkness. They didn't even have a way to see the sun and the moon. They didn't even have a way to see the sun and the moon. Okay. They were relying on torches or wherever they were relying on for light. And they were in a place of just trusting God. Noah, particularly, and his family with him, were trusting God. And I will say, people's trust was at various degrees. And we'll show that in our next lesson. We talk about the lesson, or perhaps one after that. We talk about after the flood. What happened after the flood. But Noah, and what was Noah thinking and feeling during this time? And we're going to look at that in a few minutes here. We got some clue, we got some information, some information about that. And people have wondered in the day's lesson, and there's some more we'll look at in our next lesson, kind of solidify it. But they've did there, but mission's accomplished here. Everything's going forth out of the ark. Seed's been preserved of man and animal. And notice that they're going to breed abundantly. Well, again, that tells us they didn't take old ones, they took young ones. As I mentioned before, some evidence they took young ones. And some of these, some animals, the maturity level is such that in a year and 10 months, they probably took them as babies. So the goal here is to have them at sexual maturity so they can start repopulating, breeding, and be abundantly multiplying upon the earth when they leave the ark. So in some animals, they could have brought them as, they could have brought, I'm pretty sure, cats and dogs could have been kittens and puppies, They take less space, require less food, and they'd be at prime breeding age when they got out, because the goal is to repopulate the earth with animals. That's the reason they're saved in the first place. And again, the animals were made for man's benefit. So it's mission accomplished at this point. But now we're going to look at some details. We're going to cover some details from some other sources outside of Genesis that are in the Bible. They give us some more information about, first of all, about the flood itself. And, about the flood and God's involvement in particularly. And one reason we're doing that is because I've heard people say when there's, that people shouldn't call natural disasters acts of God. Like when there's a flood or something, it's an act of Satan, except they'll say. First of all, Satan was really in charge of the weather. He'd be wiping. He generally hates the human race. Would be having a lot more of those things. And they say, well, God allows it. No, God caused the flood. This is the greatest natural disaster of all time, and it's totally right to call acts of natural disasters acts of God. That's what they are. And Job makes this plain to us here in Job 12, verses 14 through 15. Behold, he breaks down and cannot be built again. He shuts up a man, and there can be no opening. Behold, he withholds the waters, and they dry up. He sends them out, and they overturn the earth. Okay, breaks down, they cannot be built again. Remember, Hanok, Enoch, not the line of Seth, but the line of Canaan. Canaan builds the first city, names it, dedicated. That first city was broken down by God and it cannot be built again. We don't even know where it is. There's probably no way to know. It's probably under a ton of mud, mud at the time, but today it would be a sedimentary rock, maybe broken completely in fragments. We can't even tell. But God did that. He here is God. He shuts up a man, there can be no opening. He shut Noah into the ark, and there could be no opening. No matter how much Noah may have felt like wanted to open his ark, because think about it. Who's in the ark? Him, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. Without doubt, Noah had brothers and sisters that weren't in the ark. Same for his wife, same for his sons. Same for his sons' wives for certain, and probably for his sons. Noah, 500 years old, probably had more children and grandchildren and stuff than just these. But without a doubt, and who knows who came there screaming, begging to be let in. but they were left behind. It was too late. God did the shutting, and no one could open it. Noah could not open the door for them. God withheld the waters, and they dried up when this all was over. God withheld them. Rain stops. They dried up. He put them back in the ground, in the ocean, under the ocean, as one scientist put it. He's also the one that sent the rain, that sent the waters out in the first place. And those waters overturned, destroyed the earth. They overran the earth. So, not only is Job referencing this flood, but he's also flat out just saying God's the one who did it. But we have a second witness here about this in Jeremiah 51, verses 15 through 16. He has made the earth by his power, and he has established the world by his wisdom. He stretched out the heaven by his understanding. When he utters his voice, there's a multitude of waters in the heavens. He causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. He makes lightnings with rain and brings forth the wind out of his treasures. So, who made the earth by his power? If I remember correctly, that's bara in this particular place. But again, could we translate restored, repaired? Who did this? God. Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahweh, however Yahweh, as Cherokees say, however you wish. As long as we know who we're talking about, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did this. He's the one that established the earth by his wisdom, stretches his heavens by his understanding. So now it's certain we know what we're talking about. He uttered his voice, and when he gave the command, there was a multitude of waters in the heavens. Those waters came down at his command. The vapors, he'd caused those vapors, the mist, to come up. So first at his voice, there was that multitude of waters in the heavens where he had them in store until this day, to the day when the rain came. He's the one that made lightning with the rain and brought the wind out. And remember, I didn't bring this up earlier. That's the first time that wind is ever mentioned. Not only had it never rained up to this point, it's perhaps the wind had never blown as well. Or perhaps it had, but it hadn't blown like this for sure. He's the one who brought forth that wind. So this is definitely the work of God. And all natural disasters are. Satan's the God of this world, but that world doesn't mean the earth. Remember, its cosmos means the social system. He's the God of all the ungodly. But he doesn't really control the earth. He can only do what God permits him to do. But God ultimately is in control of the earth. Man has given dominion over the earth, but God's the one who controls natural disasters. And in 2 Peter 3, 5 through 6, Peter again echoes this, and that and people shouldn't be taking this lightly and trying to just blame it and quote unquote being a natural disaster, being just happened for no reason and the like. And here's what he says. For this, again, 2 Peter 3, verses 5 and 6. For this they're willingly ignorant of, that by the word of God, the heavens of old, and the earth standing out of water and in water. Thereby, the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. Well, some of the debate about some of that flood that we talked about in Genesis 1, 2, because they would both be true, okay? And some say the heavens of old. Well, the heavens of old, the God of heavens of old, meaning from the beginning or before the beginning, actually, could be applied, but it could also be applied to Noah's flood, the flood we've been talking about. But either way, that world of wickedness in both cases perished. They were overflowed with water. And it's God, that by the word of God, this happened. It happened at God's command. It happened as God spoke first with Enoch, that one who was dedicated to God. When he named his son, the judgment was coming. And it was grace and merciful, gave them almost 1,000 years to repent. But it came as he said it would nonetheless. And he's the one that brought this flood. And he is God alone over heaven and earth. And he did not give man control over the weather and seismic activity and the things like that. He reserved that for himself. Man has control of what goes on in the earth. They didn't have control of the weather and the like. And neither does Hashatan, Satan. God is in control. I mean, from Satan's perspective, everything was going great until the flood came. And we'll look at how great they were going from his perspective in a moment here, but we've already kind of hinted at only 8 people get saved. And remember, that flood came, it had been 1,656 years since Adam was formed out of the dust. The earth could have easily, at a modest population growth, had 250 million people, but perhaps at 1 billion. And at the end, all but 8 were either ungodly or just didn't believe the word of God. From Satan's perspective, everything was going great. It looked like he was going to win it all. He certainly wouldn't have brought about the flood to end the plan that was already working. This was the work of God, not Satan. So when there is disasters, it's not about blaming God. It's more about saying, why did he do this? Because he did it for a reason. And he brought judgment on someone. They did something, okay? Like those people we saw whose mind was on evil continually, and the earth was full of violence. They did something. He didn't just precociously go, yeah, this ought to be fun, like my son used to do with Sim City, where he'd create disasters just to see what his response would do. So God brought this flood. Now we're going to talk about Noah a little bit. We alluded to this earlier. Some about what Noah may have been feeling and thinking in particular, and some other things about Noah, about his character we already alluded to, and how and we can be certain, as I said, by faith he had faith the entire time of the flood. But let's look at what else he felt and may have felt and thought, and we know that we're told about here. Beginning with Hebrews 11, verse 7. By faith, Noah warned of God things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by which condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Okay, first thing, Noah had faith. And as I said, we will show in our next episode, the next lesson, or perhaps the one after that, how they all had to have had some faith because they got on the ark, but it was at various levels and various degrees. But Noah was steadfast in his faith. Yet he also had some feelings. He was moved with fear, because God, the way of salvation depended upon Noah's cooperating and obeying it. Because he was feared God, was afraid of what was going to come, he prepared the ark for the saving of his house. Now, if he hadn't prepared the ark, when the flood would have came, Noah would have drowned. Faith without action is dead. In fact, it's not even faith. Faith is confidence that leads to action. Biblical faith, is comes to what God's word says that leads to action. And because Noah believed God, had faith. It caused him to feel afraid to do nothing. And notice, by doing this, he condemned the world by preparing this ark. He not only, you know, the world, everyone around there could see this boat, this giant box being built. Things not yet seen. Noah telling them water's going to come falling out of the sky one day. And they had never experienced that. It just came up as a mist out of the ground. And so the world was without excuse. They saw Noah, how sincere Noah was was in this. But they didn't turn to righteousness. And notice he became the heir of righteousness, which is by faith. All that were righteous after Noah came from Noah. Everyone else was righteous before him had died before the flood. Everyone was unrighteous, died in the flood. He became the heir of that righteousness of faith. He received it as an inheritance for the reasons we discussed before. So Noah's got this steadfast walk with God. Won't turn to the left or right. Someone would say stubbornness about him, but he still felt fear. But it's not all he felt. It's not all he felt. We're gonna look at here in 1 Peter, verse 3, verse 18 through 20, and get some more insight. For Christ also suffered once for sins, for the just for the unjust, and might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but being quickened by the Spirit, by which he also went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometime were disobedient. When once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. Okay, notice there's really quite a bit in there. Remember, we talk about these spirits. That's those angels that had created those giants. We're putting literal word is Tadaru. Remember, Hades, Greek. It's Greek. The Greek word that's translated from Sheol, the Hebrew word. They both mean the unseen place. The place of the place of the dead, of the unseen place of the dead. And we showed before how it's got different parts. There's an abyss. There's that lowest Sheol that's put on fire. We're told in the Torah by God, where the rich man was. Up there in the Abraham's bosom, the paradise part, an abyss between them. Well, there's also this place, this compartment where these angels were, and how we talked about how they're held. They're not necessarily in torment, but they're held in chains in darkness, waiting for the judgment that's going to come at the great white throne judgment. That's now. The long suffering of God waited in the days. During this time, when time's going on, this long suffering of God, remember, Methuselah, 969 years of warning for people, of warning that this judgment's coming. Noah is preparing that judgment for 100 years. We saw from when he's 500 till he's 600, and yet only 8 souls were saved. And undoubtedly, Noah, his family, Noah's wife, his children, his daughters, all knew people who weren't saved. And there was undoubtedly a certain, Noah's righteous. The righteous do not rejoice in the destruction of the wicked. There was a period of mourning, perhaps, on the ark there. A time of great, mixed with gladness that they were alive. that mankind was being given a second chance. But great sadness as well that all these people had perished in only these 8. But it's even worse than that for Noah. There's something else that was heavily weighing on his soul, as it were, as we're going to see here in 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved to judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing the flood upon the world of the ungodly. And this, the world, again, remember, world, the cosmos, the social, that world system of the ungodly. Noah, notice, was a preacher of righteousness. Not only of the ark as a visible, he preached for 100 years. In biological standards, they'd say, well, he had the most unsuccessful ministry ever. He only got 7 people saved in 100 years. They were family members. One was his wife, and maybe, it's very possible he had other sons and daughters we know nothing about. It's very likely he didn't get all of his family saved. He certainly didn't get all of his extended family saved. And how he must have yearned for them to be saved. Because again, the righteous do not rejoice in the destruction of the wicked. God himself, remember, we just read this, was long suffering. The ark was big enough that it could have held many more. And if it got too many for the ark and a revival broke out, God may have just done away with the whole judgment as he's done in grace many times. We've seen he pronounced the judgment. The people repented, like Nineveh, in the judgment, and then the judgment was put off, or delayed, or maybe even done away with. But there was no such revival for Noah. And how he, day after day, every time he's going out getting supplies or whatever he's doing, in this 100 years, every time he encounters other people, he's preaching to them righteousness, how they need to turn from this wickedness, not having the mind to continue on evil all the time. In turn to walking with God, he can show, and he's willing to show them how to walk with God. He's willing to show them what's just because he's been walking with God. And they're just not interested. Instead, they were all destroyed. So some of what Noah is feeling, besides, definitely gladness that him and is at least able to save some of his family, and that mankind was being given, joy that mankind's going to be given a second chance, and and all the beloved animals, all their types are saved as well. But also fear that moved him in the first place. Sadness that people wouldn't listen. Disappointment that is preaching. And Noah, being human, probably would have been tempted to open that door. But the judgment was in the hand of God. And all Noah could do was watch and perhaps cry in the ark. Cry in the ark as he heard the pounding of fist on the side of the ark, and the muffled voices of people saying, "Now we believe, let us in." And I will show more evidence of this in our next lesson, as I said. That, it disturbed Noah without a doubt, and we'll see that. Now in Matthew 24, 37 through 41, we read we read some more, and people have said, well, they believe, and we're going to start here. well, I'll read it first and we'll talk about it. Again, Matthew 24, 37 to 41. As the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying, giving in marriage till the day that Noah entered into the ark. And knew not the flood came and took them away, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Then two shall be in the field, and one shall be taken, the other left. And two women grinding the mill, one shall be taken, and the other left. Okay, we talked about as in the days of Noah, how we describe those. And we recapped violence and man's mind on things continually evil. But notice here, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, the casualness of everyone. Noah's been out there preaching for 100 years, preaching righteousness, turn from the sin. Who knows? Perhaps God will not, will hold off the judgment, or if you'll just repent, or perhaps if you can't get enough, and come into the ark, help me build it, and come in there and come to this place of safety. But they just treat him with casualness, and didn't believe it till they were destroyed. In the same way, it'll be when the Son of Man comes. And people know those last two verses there, 40 and 41. People have said that's about the rapture. Some have argued it's not. Well, let's just look at them in context. Taken how? Well, how were they took away in the flood? It means they were destroyed. And remember, the flood is a picture of the tribulation. In the tribulation, some are going to make it and some aren't. The two in the field kind of indicates men. They're usually in the field. Women, male and female, like we saw. Okay. Clean and unclean. Okay. So the unclean perhaps represent those who won't repent. But many people are going to be destroyed during the flood. During the tribulation that's coming. People have said it's about the rapture, but again, in the context, how were they taken away? They were taken away in destruction. So this is actually talking about the people being destroyed, taken in destruction, the tribulation, not one snatched away during the rapture. And the word, again, rapture is the Latin word from arpazo, the Greek word. It's just a Latin translation. We have the English word rapture, and it's certainly in the Bible in Thessalonians. It says they'll be snatched away, or taken away, gathered, to meet the Lord in the air. And that word literally means like a mother snatching her child out of danger's way. So it could have very well been translated as raptured. Okay. There's no doubt the word the rapture is a biblical concept. Jesus said in Luke 21, 20, verse 36, Noah escaped the judgment came upon all the earth, the flood. Those who watch in prayer are also going to escape the judgment comes upon all the earth as well. And that brings us here to Luke 17, 26 to 27. We're going to talk about that. It ties in here to our Luke passage. And we'll talk about this some more in a future lesson, but in a little more detail. But here in Luke 17, verse 26 to 27, we read this also. Also in the days of Noah, also will be in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat and drink. They drank. They married wives, were given in marriage the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Okay. How many of the wicked were destroyed? All the wicked. Okay. A little different we just saw in this time to come where one's taken and one's left. All right. The tribulation does not destroy everyone, but everyone definitely suffers in it, and you don't want to be here during it for sure. But notice, remember, the ark came when the judgment of God came down, the ark went up. Well, who went in the ark? The worthy went in the ark. Those who were watching and praying, those who were watching for the word starting of Enoch. The judgment's coming. How we know, and we'll even give a sign of when it's going to come when Methuselah's son dies. And a week later, it came. Noah preached righteousness, and indeed it came. But what was their attitude towards it? Casualness. That crazy Noah. They didn't believe until the judgment came, and then it was too late for them. Noah escaped the judgment that came upon all the earth. And in the same way, in Luke 21 or 36, and you can look at the preceding verses as well and see it's very plain about the tribulation, the snare that will come upon all the earth. Pray that you're worthy to escape it. That snare is the tribulation. Escape how much of it? All of it. Just as Noah escaped all of it, he didn't half drown or dog paddled and got pulled into the boat. He escaped, not the boat, I'm sorry, the box. He escaped all of it. And it's the same way. But sadly, people wouldn't listen. And the number of people who had that revival that started with Enos, the son of Sheth, when Enos was born, had dwindled down. And that's the way revivals are. And it's just like the parable of the sower, where if you notice 1 out of 4 hears the word, doesn't faze them at all. But 3 out of 4 are there. But then when hardship comes, 1 out of 4 leaves. And when the cares of this world, these things we're talking about, just the busyness of life draws them away from staying and following Messiah wholeheartedly. And that the good seed is that one that stays with it, like Noah was that good seed. Now, so we know the judgment's coming. Does that mean we can't ever get married or anything? Well, Noah's sons got married, and they were given them marriage. The sons' wives were given them marriage. Noah ate and drank. I mean, in 500 years, 100 years, he would have died if he didn't eat and drink. But it's talking about not being caught up in the cares of this world. And they were caught up in the cares of this world. That's where their focus was, and they had no time for God and for this. They didn't want to be on the God standard. They were off it and had no interest in going back on it. And they were just having too much fun doing what they were doing to be bothered with it. And it's like so many today. And in 2 Peter 3, verse 2 through 4, we close with this. And should be mindful of the words which were spoken before the holy prophets of the commandment of us, the apostles of the Lord and Savior. Knowing this first, that shall come in the last day, scoffers, walking after their own lust, saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fires fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. I mean, there's one other thing I want you to draw out to your attention here about the words of Yeshua, because people have said, oh yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, but I really don't believe. The guy say anything that happened before Abraham was historical, except really happened. Well, then you're saying Jesus is a liar, because Jesus plainly says here and here that there was a Noah. He was a real person. That there was a real ark. There was a real flood, and it really happened. And as C.S. Lewis noted about when it comes to Jesus, Yeshua, you want to go with Hebrew, Yeshua, if you want to go with Aramaic, Jesus, if you want to go with Greek, Jesus, if you want to go Spanish, as you please. We know who we're talking about, the Son of God here, the Son of Man, referring to himself here as the Son of Man, the Messiah. And when you're talking about him, as C.S. Lewis pointed out, he's either a liar, Lord. He's either a liar, lunatic, or Lord. Either he's a liar. He's telling you something that's not true. And he knows it's not true. Now, if you think he knows that Noah didn't really exist and stuff, and he's saying he did, like some sort of allegory or something, you're saying he's a liar. 2, he can be a lunatic. He's delusional. He's saying it's true and he believes it's true. It's just not true. But if he's Lord, you believe he's not a liar, then you must believe what he's saying about Noah and the ark and the flood and all these things we talked about being real, true, historical facts. And the evidence of these facts are everywhere, all over the earth. I mentioned the lava plumes on Everest. Well, the Grand Canyon, there's a tour people can take where the guy just goes over the Grand Canyon, shows you all the evidence in the flood the Grand Canyon itself presents. When I was a kid, they said, well, the Grand Canyon was caused by the Colorado River, moving and back and forth and channeling this down over, millions of years. I mean, if you ever looked at I flew the Grand Canyon once and looked at it, the Grand Canyon's, very, very wide, miles wide in some places. And the Colorado River looks like a little, you can't even hardly see it, but then on a map, it looked like a little blue line, between these two borders. And you got the northern rim and the southern rim, which are like two different worlds of their own. They're completely different as far as life, wildlife that lives on them, and plants and whatever, and and now they said, well, there used to be this big inland sea, and it burst through and went and washed this out. All right, well, if that caused the Grand Canyon by itself, then why didn't the canyon extend all the way, all the way out to the Sea of Cortez out there, where the Colorado River dumps into the ocean in Mexico? But some say, well, the canyon was the sea or whatever. Okay, then when they want formed it, and how, and accept and where the water go. But the fact is, the flood historically happened. If you're not saying Messiah is a liar or lunatic, then you have to believe also the flood occurred as Messiah said. Which brings us to our verse we were reading out. Perhaps I'll just read it again just to make sure here, because it's important to this verse. In Hebrews, in 2 Peter 3, verses 2 through 4, we read this. Be mindful of the words which were spoken before of the Holy Spirit, of the holy prophets, of the commandment of us, the apostle of the Lord Jesus, of the apostle of the Lord and Savior. Knowing this, there shall come in the last days scoffers walking after their own lust, saying, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. So notice the commandment of the apostles of not the liar, not the lunatic, the Lord. As I mentioned a moment ago, the holy prophets, those who wrote the Tanakh, so much more common, which people often call the Old Testament or the Older Testament, as opposed to the newer one, which is Brit Hadashah in Hebrew, which is literally the renewed covenant. In Greek, the Greek words mean the same thing: renewed, not brand new in time, but renewed. As I've mentioned before. Now, some of these scoffers are the ones who are out there saying these things I just said. You're a scoffer if you're out there. And why would they say this? They're walking after their own lust. They are like the people in the days of Noah. Their mind is on evil continually. They may be in a congregation. That congregation may meet on the Sabbath. It may meet on Sunday or some other day. They may tell you they're believers. But when it comes down to it affecting how they live, they aren't living like Noah, righteousness that caused the grace of God to fall on him. Instead, they see the grace of God as a sin. They don't believe God will really judge them for wickedness and for sinfulness. And therefore, they can't believe the story of Noah, because Noah makes it very plainly that that's exactly what's going to happen. And what they say, everything continues as it was. There's no flood. Things just always went. People are born, they die, they get married, they have children, they get divorced, they they commit murder, they people rape, people whatever wickedness you can think of, and everything's just always been that way. It's always going to be this way, because they don't believe the words of Messiah. So they don't believe, and part of that unbelief is not believing God really did not a natural disaster, some random act, not an act of Satan, not something that people had any control over. God himself brought judgment on the entire world and wiped out everyone but 8 people. The judgment came upon all the world, and those who were watching and praying are the only ones counted worthy to escape. And that is the ultimate message for us about the flood. It's coming it's going to happen again with the tribulation and the rapture. Even though the tribulations, we said, it's not going to kill everyone. You do not want to be here. A good time will be had by none. Watch and pray and be counted worthy to escape that. And how you can't escape, how you count worthy? Start watching and praying. If you're watching, praying, and believe it, you're going to be moved to action like Noah was. His action was preparing the ark. Our action is carrying out the Great Commission, telling others about the gospel, being a preacher of righteousness, just as Noah was. We need to be moved with fear as well. The tribulation is terrible, and we don't want to be here. So, live right in God's eyes, and do what He's told us to prepare by spreading out the message of His kingdom. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.